let me thank Robert Frank, Emeritus Professor of Economics at Cornell University, for having accepted our interview. And hi, Robert. Welcome.
Hello, Alessio. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. So just some questions, about the big conference that we are organizing in Perugia for this Manifesto of the Renaissance of Economics. So your books, and in general, your books for a broader audience and your textbooks for many generations of students are a reference, have always been a reference. Also here in Italy, they are widely adopted in many universities. So you have always gone in depth on the limits of modeling the individual with purely self-regarding preferences. And this is also a key point of the manifesto. So do you think that broadening human preferences and keeping into account other regarding preference has important consequences on theory and policy implications?
Of course, I believe that it does. And it's interesting because the very term other regarding preferences is, I think, still not very well understood by people who use it. It means many different things. I think the common idea when people hear the term is that it is about keeping up with the Joneses. I don't know if that's an expression in Italian or not, but it's quite common to hear that expression in English. I always tell my junior colleagues who are interested in these kinds of issues never to use that expression, because it summons images of envy and jealousy and negative feelings. I think the reason what other people do matters so much to us is that it creates a context that shapes our evaluations of things. And that's completely neutral. That's not a good thing or a bad. If you imagine trying to answer questions without a frame of reference, it's usually a meaningless exercise. So you imagine you're taking your daughter to see her grandparents, and let's say there's 10 kilometers left on a 12-kilometer journey that you're on. And she says, "Are we almost there yet?" What will you say? No, we have a long way to go. So then it's a 310-kilometer journey, and we've gone 300 kilometers. Are we almost there yet? Yes, we're about to arrive. So context shapes judgments in totally normal ways. And if you ask, is my house okay? Is my daughter's school okay? Is the food I'm eating okay? That demands a frame of reference for thinking about the question. And if your house is really small and poorly maintained relative to the other houses in your immediate neighborhood, then you will feel your house isn't okay. For 2 years, I lived in a 2-room house. It didn't have any running water. It didn't have any electricity. I was then living in Nepal, where I was teaching in a village school. Never for 1 minute did the house seem not okay. It was a perfectly satisfactory house. But that same house here would not be okay. So because context shapes our evaluations, it influences profoundly what we do, how we spend our money, where we choose to live, what careers we choose to pursue. All that matters a great deal. The other main thing people think about when they think about other regarding preferences is the moral emotions. So we feel sympathy for others in distress. We feel pride in others who've achieved something that we admire. All those moral emotions are actually instrumental in helping us achieve goals that are very important of our own. So you want to engage in a transaction with somebody that requires trust. He could cheat you and you would have no way of knowing. Well, you want somebody who won't want to cheat you. And the question then is, can you identify such a person in advance? And I think this thought experiment persuades me that the answer is yes. So imagine that you've gone to a concert, you had an envelope with 10,000 euros in it, you're about to buy a car the next day for cash. You get home, the envelope's no longer in your pocket. And then you realize as you put your coat on, there was that sound that must have been the envelope falling out of your pocket and hitting the floor. Can you think of anyone not related to you by blood or marriage who you feel certain would return your cash if she found it? And most people answer yes when you put that question to them. Well, you could hire that person to help manage this enterprise that requires trust then. And if you don't know such a person, maybe you need to rethink how you've organized your life.
Yes, absolutely. So in these times, we are facing also a new challenge, and we all think that this transformation that the artificial intelligence is going to bring in our societies will shape again also the individual relations. So this kind of revolution can even be disruptive if we imagine its consequences in the near future. And in terms of economics and economic theory, we are almost all sure that it will transform also many of our customs in terms of labor market, in terms of inequality, poverty, possibilities. So on this regard, which is your point in terms of policy, in terms of the challenges that economics is going to face? In the hypothetical case that technology is able to produce value even without labor, is a citizen income a viable solution in your point of view?
Yeah, it's interesting. The AI challenge is in some deep respects very similar to the old automation challenge that we faced for centuries even. Machines can now do the work that men struggled to do, and that had profound impacts on labor markets and income distributions. This will have similar impacts in many ways. One difference is that it will tend to focus more on people in the upper part of the income distribution, not the very top of the income distribution, but in the upper part. So people like me, I imagine some AI program will someday be able to write a better economics textbook than I could ever write.
I don't think so.
Or compose a more intelligent test for students to take, or we do know that the doctors who interpret X-rays now are not nearly as good at finding the hidden clues in them as artificial intelligence programs who examine the same data. Those are not poor workers; those are workers in the upper quarter of the income distribution. So that's a new feature of the AI disruption. Where it will not differ is that I think it will reinforce the tendency for wealth and incomes to concentrate at the very top. So one of my sons is a computer programmer. He's the head of a software team at the New York Times. He says he will need very, very many fewer people to write routine code for the tasks they do. But the people who are good at solving unique problems will be even more valuable than before. So it's that kind of effect. It multiplies the leverage of the very best people by a much bigger multiple and hits directly at the incomes of people further down. As for what to do about that, I think, yes, the clear answer is if the AI revolution makes the economic pie bigger, it's necessarily possible for everybody to get a larger slice of pie than before. That's just a simple matter of geometry. Draw two pies on the page, cut them up any way you like in the first one, which is smaller, then draw the bigger one and cut them up in exactly the same way. Everybody's slice is bigger than before. So mathematically, we know it's possible for everyone to do better when the pie gets bigger. The challenge is to muster the political will to do the redistribution. I think there are many things to like about a guaranteed income or a stipend for every citizen. I think a much better approach would be to give a small stipend to every citizen, not enough to live on, and then make available an offer of a public task that could be done in addition, that when the stipend and the wage for that task were added together, we got a very good income. So people would then enjoy the dignity of feeling like they were doing something useful. There would be less political resentment when others see people getting income without working. And so I think that's a solution that I think dominates the proposal, just to give people money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this direction is to involve people, to make them responsible, to give them the possibility to feel involved in the creation of value.
Yes.
So this is very important because it qualifies the effort of each person, and this makes him or her feel involved in the community. This is the very first basilar thing. So I agree deeply with you. And also in terms of our previous research outcomes, in terms of meritocracy, naive meritocracy, and the lack, in the sense that the role of context. Maybe this discourse opens to the fact that the taxation should be organized in a way that, of course, individual talent can be rewarded, but we should never forget the relevance of the context where we live, in the systems where we live, because those systems give us opportunities that we then develop and we exploit as we can, but still they're relevant. So, which is your opinion in terms of progressive taxation policies?
I have always been a strong advocate of more progressive taxation than we currently employ. And it's interesting to see that the policy moves have been going in exactly the opposite direction ever since World War II. The top tax rate in the US in World War II was 92%. It's now 37%. It's higher in most European countries, but there too we've seen movement towards less progressivity. And I think it's been mainly the political influence of people at the top that explains that movement. They believe that if they pay higher taxes, it will be harder for them to buy what they want. And fortunately, that belief is completely false. There's a very large literature on the determinants of human flourishing. People argue about what matters most. There's a lot of back and forth. But one of the least contentious findings in that literature is that beyond a certain point, further increases in many forms of private consumption don't have any impact at all on either health or happiness. If all the mansions get twice as big, the people living in them aren't healthier or happier than before. In fact, they're less happy. Why? Because it's much more trouble to manage a big mansion than to manage a small mansion. You have to hire many more employees. You have to worry about somebody will write a book telling the family secrets. Much better if all the mansions were smaller. The trend in the US has been, as income concentrates at the top, of course, people at the top spend more money. And they think that makes them better off, but they don't take into account that when everybody spends more, relative consumption levels remain the same. Here in this country now, average expenditures on wedding receptions are $30,000 in inflation-adjusted terms. They were $10,000 in 1980. So it's 3 times higher, and nobody's happier as a result of that. The only question is, given the current context, how much must we spend so that guests aren't disappointed? And as we all spend more, that level goes up and up, but nobody benefits from it. The So I've been, as you know, writing about this for many decades, and one of my great frustrations is that it seems to have had zero impact on people's voting behavior. So if everybody would be better off, even the rich would be better off if we all spent more on public goods and less on private consumption, why don't they elect politicians who will do that? And my answer is that it's because they suffer from what I call the mother of all cognitive illusions.
Yes.
They think they won't be able to buy what they want. And the problem is, if you're trying to think about how an event will affect you, the easiest way to envision the consequences are trying to remember the last time a similar event occurred. How did you feel about it then? That doesn't work in the current environment, because if you're wealthy, your tax rate has been going down, not up. You can't think about the last time they raised your taxes because they haven't raised your taxes. So you need plan B. And what's that? Well, I think back to the last time I had less income. And unless you've been very, very lucky, there will have been times in your life when you did have less income. Maybe you had a house fire. Maybe you were in an earthquake. Maybe you had a child who was accused of a serious crime and you had to hire an expensive lawyer. Maybe you got a divorce. Maybe you had a health crisis. All these things result in you having lower income than before. And every one of those times you have bitter, unhappy memories of how you felt. What you don't realize is that each of those times you had less money than before, but everybody else had the same. So of course you are less able to bid for life's special luxuries. There are only so many penthouse apartments with sweeping views. Who gets them? The people who bid most for them. And when your taxes go up and my taxes go up and everybody else in our circle also pays higher taxes, the keys to those apartments end up in the same hands as before. So that's the miracle in all this. Rich and poor alike could be much happier if we spent much more on public goods, medical research, paving the streets, climate mitigation, all these things that we know would matter, and much less on building bigger mansions and staging more expensive coming of age parties.
Yes, and you mentioned the big challenge that we are also facing in terms of this enormous problem of the global warming, which is affecting somehow the life of all countries in the world, because we are experiencing consequences of the way in which economies have developed since the World War. And we see that it will be really one of the major, if not the greatest one, the most important challenges in the very near future, even today. So the fact that effectively we are facing global challenges, and that even in the perspective that we have already discussed about AI, we have to always found new ways to develop the correct reward, the right reward for any application, for any attitude, for any ability of people. And we are in front of symptoms all saying that societies tend to concentrate income, so to make rich richer and poor poorer. So how can we cut this problem horizontally and face the global warming in the sense of the technological update it requires, the new wave of attitudes and habits and labor applications that it will imply, and how this will affect, in which direction, in your opinion, should we go in policy terms to drive this challenge successfully?
Yeah, that's a great set of questions, Alessio. The simple fact is traditional economics has a very clear and cogent explanation for why we face the problem we're facing now. It's that lots of activities generate greenhouse gases. They're costly to filter out, or it's costly to adopt alternative methods of production and consumption that emit less. And so since there's no penalty for emitting greenhouse gases, people choose the cheaper methods. That's not even a puzzle that they would do that, because if one person emitted less, that would have absolutely no measurable impact on anything. So he would say, I can cut my income in half while everybody goes on, and it will make no difference. Why should I do that? And we shouldn't be surprised that people say, I shouldn't do that. The simple remedy that would have prevented this problem from arising in the first place would have been a carbon tax, or a tax on emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. It's too late to evade the problem, but more than any other step we could take, the adoption of a very steep carbon tax now, even at this late date, would be probably the most important step to take. But that's a very politically challenging thing to do. Why? Because many people see the threat from climate change as being in the distant future. As you point out, it's already upon us. We're suffering grievous costs already. But the worst costs are yet to come. If crops fail around the world and we see refugees literally in the billions, imagine the political instability, how that will compare with even the high level of political instability we see today. So what we need to do is figure out how to make it more politically palatable to impose a very heavy carbon tax. The social cost of carbon now is much, much higher than the original estimates said. It's like $200 a ton, which is many times greater than the original estimate said. And people would scream loud and clear if a tax of that sort were put on. But here's the good news. What we know from an Oxfam study is that 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from the top 10% of the income distribution worldwide. It's the rich who are generating most of the emissions. And so if the politicians were smart, they could impose a very steep carbon tax and design a rebate scheme, make it revenue neutral. That means you collect all the revenue, most of which would come from the wealthy, and then you give it back to whomever you choose. You could give it back in a very progressive way. You could design a scheme easily where 90% of all voters would get more back in refunds each month than they had paid in carbon taxes. And imagine the effect of a tax like that. The conventional economic analysis just looks at short-run demand elasticities. If meat gets more expensive, we shift to plant-based foods. But what that analysis completely ignores is the fact that if we take a small step to change our behavior, that influences others in our local sphere. Why do you eat spaghetti more often than I do? Because you're around people who eat spaghetti more often than I do. We all do what people around us do. And the good news about that is that if you tax meat-based foods because they have bigger carbon footprints, and I cut back a little bit, then suddenly it becomes more acceptable for my neighbor to cut back because I served a vegetarian meal and he liked it. Now he doesn't worry about insulting me if he serves a vegetarian meal. And it spreads. We saw this happen with the tax on cigarettes. People went right on smoking when we taxed cigarettes, most of them, but a few people quit. And when some quit or didn't take up smoking in the first place, then there were fewer smokers in every peer group. That meant others were more likely to smoke or more likely to quit. They were less likely to smoke. And so gradually, we've seen the smoking rate fall from 40% down to 12% in the US. I don't know what it is in Italy, but I know it's fallen there too. And these policy instruments that we have are much more powerful than we realize. So I think there are solutions. We will, of course, need to do much more than that. Fortunately, there are technologies under development. for sucking carbon out of the air. That's for some reason controversial. We will need to do it. It will be expensive to do it, but if we get started on it now, it will get cheaper more quickly. So I think the big barrier, in addition to people not wanting to pay taxes, is that their sense that it's already too late, it's hopeless. It's not too late. We can solve this problem and still get everything else done that we need to get done, just because we may waste so much more money in other ways.
Yes, absolutely. And also we can consider that, however, taxes and market remedies to problems of society, they still rely on the price concept, on the market concept. We can also try to maybe do an effort in terms of social education and awareness of people, because as you already said, the fact that we observe our mates and we basically follow our habits, our culture, this can be also a part of the solution, because the solution can be a qualification of people. Exactly as you already explained to us about the income distribution and the involvement of people in creating value for society. Educational levers can be extremely effective in inducing new habits. And a part of the goal of the manifesto is exactly to underline again and again the relevance that economics has the very core to study the man. So its role, its passions, its sentiments, also the side of our life which does not pass through a market price. And
Yes.
This can be a very nice challenge. So I thank you so much, Robert, for your time and your presence here in this interview, and I look forward to hear for your keynote speak.
It's been my pleasure, Alessio, and I too look forward to the session.
Thank you very much.